And that was history in the making last night when Hillary sat down with Bill O'Reilly, one-on-one, mano-a-mano, and of course, one of the first things that came up, in fact, I think it was the first thing, it was Reverend Jeremiah Wright and her take on it.
Right. Take a listen.
All right, now
she very shrewdly manages to mention the most outrageous, least believable thing that he said. I mean, nobody could really be expected to believe that. So she says it, she gets it in there, she repeats it, and she says, it's about time Senator Obama distanced himself from him. I agree with Senator Obama did. Finally.
Yes. But you know what's funny, Judge, is that at first she sort of tried to shrug off the question. She said, well, that's for voters to decide. That was her first answer. But
and then Bill pushes.
Bill pressed her and said, come on, I'm offended. And then she said, I'm offended, and she spoke out more forcefully. But she was ready to let it go. You know, it's for the voters to decide. But, of course, Bill O'Reilly doesn't let anything go. So that was the first time that they talked about that. And as you said, it gave her actually an opportunity. I mean, there were a lot of opportunities in this interview for her, and their chemistry was very, very interesting. She seemed, to me, almost relaxed. She seemed energetic, relaxed. She didn't seem as intimidated as you would think for never having gone on O'Reilly's show before.
I got to tell you, whatever you think of her, whatever you think of her husband, whatever you think of their politics, she was supremely relaxed last night. They were almost, forgive me, Bill, playful with each other. They were enjoying the time that they spent together. And in fact, Hillary addressed a rally, in Indiana a few hours later and said, guess what I just did? I was just interviewed by Bill O'Reilly and I let the oil companies have it. And she did.
Right. I mean, I'm sure that is quite a feather in her cap.
Well, Bill O'Reilly's audience includes a lot of folks, many of whom are the people that we call Reagan Democrats. These are people that would not see her on either of the other cable networks. So it was a very wise move to reach a segment that she wants to vote for her, which loyally watches Bill O'Reilly.
All right, we have so many more of the clips from their one-on-one last night to show you throughout this hour.
Okay, when we come back, Bill O'Reilly and Hillary Clinton, if you'll pardon the phrase, mano a mano. You'll hear some of the toughest questions she's ever faced.
All right, welcome back, everybody. All hour long, we're showing you some excerpts of this interview last night that Bill O'Reilly did with Hillary Clinton. It's the first time that she visited his show. And we just showed you one about how she reacted to the Reverend Wright controversy.
Now, Bill hits her on the issues voters really need to know about: taxes.
You know, your husband and I make a lot of money. Did you know that?
I've heard that.
Yeah, we make a lot of money. And you, if you're president, are going to take more of my money and your husband's money away.
You understood that our country works better when we're all in it together. Now, 90% of the benefits of income in the last decade have gone to people like us. Income distribution was much broadly dispersed. You were growing up on Long Island. I was growing up outside of Chicago. You know, my dad got up every day. He was a small businessman. He worked his head off, but he didn't feel like the deck was stacked against him. He thought, okay, I'm going to be treated fairly if I do my part.
Here's where you're wrong. In my neighborhood, Levittown, there was no income distribution at all. There was earning money.
That's right.
And you kept most of it because taxes were really low.
That is not true. That is not. Look at the tax rates in the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s.
For wealthy, they were high, but not for my dad.
Well, and so why don't we go back to what we had in the 50s and the 60s then? Go back
because
to 70%.
There were no wealthy people then.
Well,
there were very, very few.
When President Kennedy made that dramatic announcement he was going to cut the top rate from 90% to 70%, people stood up and cheered. All I want to do is get back to what worked in the 90s.
Okay.
In the 90s, we had one of the strongest, fairest economies we've ever had. Yes, did people like you and me pay a little bit more? We sure did. But so did everybody else benefit because middle-class taxes stayed pretty even.
We had a pretty good economy under Bush except for the last year.
No, we've had a really, you know, in the last 7 years, the typical American family's lost $1,000 in income. Their energy costs have gone up $2,000. The average tax cut that they got out of whatever he was doing was $600. People are net losers under the Bush economy. They were net winners under the Clinton economy. We're going to bring back a good, positive economy for the vast majority of Americans.
I'm going to let you go on that because I want to get on to other stuff, but I think that's debatable.
But we could go on all day.
Yeah, you could.
Interesting stuff. I mean, she was clear about that she would raise Bill O'Reilly's taxes, and anybody who makes more than $250,000. She did equivocate a little bit, I think, on the payroll taxes, and Bill tried to get an actual answer out of her, but she was a little slippery there.
I think 2 points come from this, and Bill Salmon will be here in a minute, and he has some very interesting analysis on it. One is she parried very nicely with Bill O'Reilly, and she was prepared for his allegation that you're basically a socialist. The second is she is a socialist. She wants to take profits from oil companies because she thinks they make too much. She rejects JFK, who said a rising tide lifts all ships. If you reduce taxes on the rich, there's more money to invest and more jobs.
Yet she shrewdly invoked the name of Ronald Reagan.
Right.
To your point that she's appealing to the Reagan Democrats. Bill Salmon is the chief White House correspondent with the Washington Examiner. Bill, you watched this interview. Can you give us one adjective that you think sums up this interview?
It's a sign of the apocalypse.
What was your take on this interview?
Well, I was struck by how tough it was. I mean, when you get into Hillary's face and say, you're polarizing, you're a socialist. At one point in the last clip, in the last segment, Bill said, here's where you're wrong. And I thought he said things to her that were tougher than things I've seen in any previous interview. And I think that had a lot to do with the chemistry of the interview, because she had to sort of gamely, parry with him and fight back. And she looked like a fighter, but she still looked affable. I thought it kind of got her out of that Stepford wife, stiff, stilted persona that sometimes you see in some of these more formal interviews. And I think it actually worked very well for O'Reilly, and I think it worked very well for Hillary because she looked real.
You know what we didn't see last night, Bill, was that hideous laugh that she sometimes uses.
You should talk.
Well, all right, but I'm not running for president. When she doesn't like the question, she does that shrill laugh. I was expecting her to roar with laughter when Bill said you're a polarizing figure. Instead, she went right back at him.
It was almost as if she sensed that she was, I hate to say it, but, that she was in the no-spin zones.
Bill, were there any news nuggets? Was there anything that we heard her say last night that we hadn't heard before? For instance, perhaps on taxes?
Yeah, I was struck by the fact, let's face it, I mean, there was a lot of substance in this interview, but the real news is that Hillary sat down with Bill O'Reilly. Now, this is a woman who last year, when she needed to, win the support of the liberals in the Democratic Party, boycotted Fox News. She refused to participate in any debates that were sponsored by Fox News. This year, when her back is up against the wall and her only path to victory is to win over the Reagan Democrats that watch Fox News, she calls up, or she has her campaign call up Bill O'Reilly's office and say, look, I'm available. Come and interview me. So, let's be honest about what's going on here. Hillary Clinton needs Fox News at this time, and that's why she agreed to do this interview.